Warm greetings to everyone tuning in today. I am Diana, your guide on this enlightening journey. Today we're going to unravel the complexities of the blame game. Now, you might be wondering, what exactly is this blame game? It's a universal phenomenon that rears its head in all walks of life, from personal relationships to professional environments. It's the act of attributing failure or wrongs to others, often to avoid personal responsibility. In this video, we'll be taking a closer look at how the blame game works, its implications, and how it impacts our lives on a daily basis. We'll explore its role in our personal relationships, delve into its prevalence at work, and finally, provide some insights on how to navigate this tricky terrain. So, sit back, relax, and let's delve into the intriguing world of the blame game. Now, what is this blame game we're talking about? Well, imagine you're in a situation where something has gone wrong. It could be a missed deadline, a failed relationship, or a project that didn't meet expectations. The first instinctive response for many of us is to look for someone to blame. This is the essence of the blame game. It's a psychological defense mechanism where people deflect responsibility for their actions or mistakes onto others. In personal relationships, it's like a heated ping-pong match. One person serves an accusation, the other person volleys it back with a counter-accusation, and before you know it, you're both lost in a whirlwind of blame and counter-blame. This game can be incredibly damaging, creating resentment, fostering mistrust, and ultimately driving a wedge between people. In a work context, the blame game takes on a different flavor. It's less about personal feelings and more about protecting one's professional reputation or job. Here, blame is often used as a tool to shift the focus away from one's own shortcomings and onto someone else's. The person blamed is left feeling defensive and wronged, while the blamer feels relieved, vindicated even. But in the long run, this only leads to a toxic work environment, where everyone is more concerned about covering their tracks than working together to solve problems. But why do we play this game? Psychologically speaking, blame is a way of alleviating our guilt, shame, or sense of failure. It's easier to point fingers at someone else than to admit we messed up. But the truth is, the blame game never really solves anything. It just creates an endless cycle of blame and counter-blame, leaving everyone feeling worse off. So, as we see, the blame game is not just a term, but a complex psychological phenomenon that affects us in more ways than we realize. How does the blame game play out in personal relationships? Let's explore. Blame is a powerful tool. It can be as subtle as a side glance or as piercing as a pointed finger. In personal relationships, whether they're romantic, familial, or platonic, the blame game often rears its ugly head when things go wrong. It's an easy trap to fall into, a convenient way to deflect responsibility and protect our fragile egos. Picture this. You and your partner have an argument, and instead of addressing the issue at hand, you find yourself pointing fingers, accusing each other, and essentially diverting from the real problem. This is the blame game in action. It's a destructive cycle that can lead to resentment, mistrust, and ultimately the breakdown of relationships. The blame isn't always overt, though. Sometimes it's veiled in passive-aggressive comments or silent treatments. These stealthy forms of blame can be just as harmful, fostering an environment of confusion and bitterness. But let's talk about the real cost of blame. By blaming someone else, we're essentially saying, "It's not my fault, it's yours." This not only erodes trust and intimacy, but also inhibits personal growth. After all, if we're always blaming others, we're never learning from our mistakes. So how can we avoid falling into the blame game? The first step is to recognize it. Pay attention to your instincts when things go wrong. Are you quick to blame others, or do you take a moment to reflect on your own actions? Next, practice empathy. Try to understand the other person's perspective. This doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but understanding their viewpoint can lead to healthier, blame-free conversations. And finally, communicate openly and honestly. Effective communication is key to resolving conflicts and avoiding blame. Remember, it's okay to admit you're wrong. It's a sign of maturity, not weakness. Remember, blaming might seem like the easy way out, but it can have deep-seated impacts on our relationships. Moving on, let's understand the blame game in a professional setting. The blame game at work is a tricky beast. It lurks around corners, hiding in the shadows of office politics, waiting to pounce at the first sign of a mistake. Whether it's a missed deadline, a botched presentation, or a failed project, the blame game is always ready to point fingers. Much like in personal relationships, the blame game in the workplace is destructive. It breeds mistrust, creates tension, and stifles creativity. It shifts the focus from problem-solving to finger-pointing, which is counterproductive. The result? A toxic work environment where innovation is stifled, morale is low, and productivity plummets. But there's a way out. The key is to foster a blame-free work environment. This doesn't mean ignoring mistakes, but rather focusing on learning from them. When something goes wrong, instead of asking who messed up, ask, what can we learn from this? Encourage open dialogue, promote teamwork, and emphasize the value of each person's contribution. Remember, it's not about assigning blame, but about finding solutions. Leaders should lead by example, showing their teams that mistakes are opportunities for growth, not reasons for punishment. In the end, it's about creating an environment where people feel safe to take risks, to make mistakes, to learn, and to grow. After all, we're all human, and humans make mistakes. Creating a blame-free work culture is not just beneficial but essential for a healthy work environment. As we wrap up our discussion on the blame game, it's clear that it's a game no one wins. Whether in personal relationships or at work, shifting blame only cultivates a hostile environment. Instead, let's foster a culture of responsibility, empathy, and open communication. It's not about who's right or wrong, but how we can grow and learn together. Remember, the only way to win the blame game is not to play. Thank you for tuning in, and see you in our next enlightening journey.